And this morning, we're talking to Seth Rollin. I kind of want to touch base on a little bit of business, a little bit of family, a little bit of fitness. So I guess the first question is, how did you first get introduced to powerlifting? Because I know your kind of whole family's kind of in it.
Yeah, it's like it's become a Bell family tradition, and just recently I had my son hit up a workout with me, and that was really cool, and hopefully it's something that he ends up enjoying. We'll kind of see how it works out. For myself, my older brothers, they were into lifting, but ultimately what happened was, and I think this is important, I think self-discovery is kind of where the magic is at, and self-education is where the magic is at. So it's kind of cool if someone pulls you into something and they say, hey, you should try this. But it's even better when you discover how great that is for you personally. So my brothers showed me some lifting stuff, but I wasn't really all about it. I wasn't really.
How old was this?
I was probably like 11.
You're 11.
12, something like that, And so I was playing football one day. I was just chucking around the football, and I was kind of a loner for some reason. I had friends and stuff, but I was always doing stuff by myself too. I'm just chucking this football up in the air, and I normally I was by myself because I was usually hanging out with my brothers. And my brother Chris is 4 years older than me. My brother Mike was 6 years older. So the older kids didn't want to throw around a football with a little kid. And so I'm chucking around this football one day, and the guy's like, "Hey, Bell, throw me the football." And I should have known better because this guy was a dick, And so I half-heartedly, chuck him the ball or whatever. He turns around and just kicks it as far as he can. He just punts it into the woods. And then I could never find the ball again. And I remember just feeling like, it just made me feel like crap because I was like, I mean, not that I would have beat him up. I'm not a violent person, but I could have at least, stood up for myself and said, dude, what are you doing? That's
right.
Crap. Why'd you do that? But, I didn't say anything. This guy was pretty big, and at the time I thought he was jacked. Looking back on it, he wasn't that jacked, but he had some biceps on him, and he was, I remember seeing him.
So he was older than you?
He was an older guy, and I remember, people used to sweat him because he used to, curl a lot of weight, which is so funny now looking back on it. But this is a long time ago. This guy had a mullet. He had the acid wash jeans on. He had the Reebok high tops going.
But you remember him. I mean,
oh, yeah, absolutely.
So this was a point in your life that was kind of a turning point.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what you said at that point, you wanted to start lifting more.
Yeah.
Were you scrawny at 11? Were you small?
No,
you're a pretty big guy right now.
Yeah, I was a pretty big kid, and but I wasn't confident, And so I kind of thought to myself, well, my brothers are showing me that lifting stuff, and maybe if I was stronger, maybe I could defend myself. There was no MMA at the time and stuff like that, so I thought this would be a good way to be able to defend myself or stand up for myself. And so that was kind of the start of it. And you can kind of cut to a Rocky montage of me going in the garage. And I thought that whole summer, I remember training, and I had him in mind. And I was using that as fuel. And I've done that my whole life. I've always used almost negative energy. I've turned it into calories, and I've used it as energy for my body and used it to fuel me. And so that whole summer I was training and nothing ever really came of it. I ran into him, years later and stuff, but I never avenged my, him punting my football into the woods or whatever,
So you never found the football?
I never found the footballs. My favorite football is my New York Jets football.
Oh, and so at this point, your brothers were lifting, you get into powerlifting, and then did you play sports throughout high school?
Yeah, I played football, I did track, and I got into boxing as well. I did a bunch of different stuff. I loved sports. I played a lot of basketball, and I loved playing sports. And when I was on the track team, the coach was like, "Hey, if you think you're going to come on this team and just be a thrower or something, I got news for everybody. Everyone on this team is going to run." And I was like, "Oh my god!" I was like, "This is going to be hard," because I was getting fat at the time. I was getting big and fat. The powerlifting stuff was. I was lifting, but I didn't know about nutrition, so I was getting big and fat. And once we started running, actually, it was great for me because the weight started coming off. I started getting better shape, and it was a good thing. But yeah, I still love watching sports. I love participating in sports.
Now, shifting. Wow, how did the powerlifting career start to develop? So when did you start competing in powerlifting?
I started competing in powerlifting right away. Powerlifting was. So I started messing around with weights at 11, and by 12, 13, I was already competing. It was pretty quick. What happened was I was bench pressing with some of my friends one day, and they were struggling to like move the bar, and one of them did like a 10 on each side. But I remember that day, you know, doing like a plate on each side, and they were like, "What the?" You know, they were kind of like confused. They're like, "Holy crap!" And then maybe a few months later, my cousin was at my house, and my brother told my cousin, he's like, "Smelly can bench 205." My cousin's like, "No way," because my cousin was the same age as my brother Chris, and he's like, "There's no way." Like, I can't even bench that. And he's like, "Well, he did it, you know." And so he's like, "Well, prove it to me." So we go down in the basement and we load up some weights, and not only did I bench 205, but I benched 205 and 210 and 215. My brother was really cautious with me. He kept putting on just 5 extra pounds until I ended up finishing at like 240 pounds. And my cousin was like, "Oh my God." And my cousin actually said, and I remember it like it was yesterday, when I got up off the bench, he said, "That's going to turn into something. I don't know what, but that's going to like be something."
Well, it sure has. And so
Yeah.
from that point on, you started competing. And so were you were competing in powerlifting then throughout high school, and then you kept competing, right? So then how did that make you feel? So we were talking earlier, and one of the things we were discussing was that in high school, there's like little groups that kind of congregate, right?
Some
So you
cliques,
had the
yeah.
little cliques, right? You had the football team and this team. And even though you were playing sports, you know, you were alluding to that you still felt like you were different from everybody else. And so looking back on high school, was that the way it was, where you kind of felt like you were off on your own kind of tangent and everybody else was kind of doing their own thing?
Yeah, so what happened with me is because I had learning disability, I was put in special classes with other kids. And so, you know, this is like the names that we were called. This is not something I believe, but we were called retards, you know, and I was put in these classes, and I was with all these different kids. So those kids didn't have, they weren't in these cliques. They weren't with the popular kids. They weren't, you know, going out on Friday night and drinking, and they weren't going to prom, and because they weren't like invited to any of this stuff. You know, they weren't.
And these are classes that you were participating in through because of a learning disability.
Yeah.
And those were
Right.
all of your classes or just some of your classes?
Most, you know, yeah, usually I got placed in those classes for one reason or another. And I just saw the divide, you know, because I was on that side of things. So I saw the divide in the school, and I was like, I was like, you know what? I don't really want to, like, those kids, they bully the same kids that I'm in class with. And I've seen that happen before, and I'd break up fights, and I'd get into fights, and then, you know, I'd get to the principal's office, and they'd say, you know, "Why'd you throw that kid on the ground?" or what. I didn't like punch people or whatever, but like it's just at like 12, 13 years old, and you know, the principal would say, "Hey, why'd you do that?" And I said, "Well, this kid just came up and knocked the kid's books out of his hands for no, you know, I didn't see any reason for it. He just knocked them out of his hands, and he shoved them up against the locker. And so I threw his ass on the ground, you know?
Right.
And so there was a lot of that stuff going on. And that's part of the reason why I didn't participate in a lot of that stuff. And then as I got a little older, once I started becoming a little bit more mature, I was like, that stuff's kind of stupid. Like, I don't want to drink. I don't want to smoke weed. Like, that's for, like, I knew at a very young age, I was like, that's for losers. That's for people that want to be stuck. And I don't want to be stuck. I want to try to like make something of myself. I want to do something. And lifting was something that gave me a lot of confidence. I always felt really good with that. And so I was like, there's going to be a time and a place where at some point I do something physical. I do something with my body that is going to be cool. And it's going to be something that I could, you know, I don't know, maybe do something even bigger with.
Well, it seems like lifting kind of gave you an outlet and a way to kind of be bigger towards these other kids. So I think you looked at lifting like, okay, if I lift more, I'm going to be in better shape. I'm going to get bigger so that these kids aren't going to be able to bully me. Sounds like that was a component, obviously.
Yeah.
And then as you started getting better, you started getting good at it at a relatively young age.
There were some other things going on too, like so I was in those, you know, classes and stuff like that. But what also gave me other perspective is I was fat. You know, I wasn't like the fat kid. I wasn't the fattest kid in the school. I didn't have like an obesity problem, but I was fat, and I wasn't liked by girls, or at least I didn't think I was. And so that played huge into a lot of it too, because a lot of these kids would go to these parties because there's chicks there. But I was like, well, I don't think any of these chicks are digging me, so what's the point in even going? And so for me, I was like, I'm going to not worry about that stuff. I'm going to train. I'm going to concentrate. I want to be a football player. That was my dream as a kid. I wanted to be a football player. And so I'm going to train, and I'm going to, you know, do stuff for football. But as I got a little bit older and as I started getting more mature and as I started lifting more, I started dropping weight. I started getting in really good shape. And now these same girls that were like making fun of me are now kind of in the picture. And I'm like, I'm not having any of that. Like, I'm not cool with that. Like, I don't want you to like me just because I got jacked. You know what I mean?
Right. And so how'd you overcome that? So you're a high school kid early on. I was bigger in high school too, but so you're kind of anti-drinking, etc. I get it, which kind of already puts you in a unique category because everybody else isn't. You have, some special needs in terms of your education, which already, again, puts you in another category. Right, wrong, or indifferent, it just puts you in a little bit of a different category. And then you have this weight on top of that. So all these different things make you kind of stand out, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Did you overcome that just by, you really put all your emphasis into sports? Is that kind of where your headspace was? Because I imagine that was tough to, was there times where you had to, you got the bullying, you have this, that. Was it lonely, and how'd you overcome that?
Yeah, it's hard to make sense of it all because I was still extremely popular. I have 2 older brothers that went through the same school as I did, and so everybody kind of knew about me, and I excelled in sports, and so therefore I was popular with that, and I was the strongest kid in the school, and so there was a lot of people knew about me. My mom would like call the school and like tell them like the weights I lifted and stuff. And then they would announce it over the loudspeaker. They'd announce like, this kid scored X amount of touchdowns over the loud. And I was so embarrassed because like powerlifting wasn't a thing.
Right.
I'd like, I'd cringe. I'd creep down in my chair and I'd be like embarrassed because nobody knew what powerlifting was. They'd be like, oh, Mark Bell went to this contest and he, benched whatever, 275 or whatever the weight was at the time. And I always thought it was kind of weird, but I was popular. So I wasn't like, I like isolated myself, I isolated myself because I didn't like the behavior that I saw from a lot of other people. And I was friends with a lot of those kids that were in those special classes with me and stuff like that.
And so you talk about your mom calling in and, announcing your accomplishments. Yeah. My parents are extremely supportive over everything I've done with CrossFit and even before that playing football. And so now your parents live next door to you, right?
Yeah.
And which is awesome. And you've been able to build this very successful business that's allowed you to live next door to your parents, which I think is great. But growing up, were your parents extremely supportive of the powerlifting thing, or did they want you, when you left high school, did you go on to college?
So my parents have been extremely supportive of every single thing I've ever done. I've always said, like, if I could be, half the man that my dad is, like, my life will be complete. My dad's just, and I'm sure a lot of people out there feel the same way about their mom or their dad, but both my parents, it's, I hope that I can be mentioned in the same breath in terms of being a parent as them. They were there for everything all the time. And so they were great. And then in terms of going to college, yeah, I felt the same pressure that a lot of people felt where you have to go to college. I think we're at an interesting time now, parents, if you're listening, you cannot hold college over your child's head anymore because it's not a path to anything necessarily. It could be a path to a great career, could be a path to a great life, but they're seeing more and more people all the time that are just becoming popular through Instagram. There's people making millions of dollars playing video games. There's lots of crazy things going on right now.
Lots of crazy things. So did you go the path through college?
Yeah, I went to a junior college while I lived in New York. I grew up in Poughkeepsie, New York, and went to Hudson Valley Community College, which is in Albany. And I went there for about a year, and then I visited my brother who lived in Los Angeles, and he was going to USC Film School. And when I came out, my brother was filming a movie, and I was on a movie set, and I was like, oh my God, like, where am I? Like, where I was from, like, nothing like that happened. It was crazy. My brother had, like, legitimate actors on set. This was a 20-minute short film that he did. But, it was the real deal. They were on a sound stage, and they had these big cameras, and I was overwhelmed. I was like, what? What is this? And I was, like, working on the movie and stuff.
Right. And so you were, like, 19 at this time, 20?
Yeah, I'm probably about 19. And I was like, wow. I'm like, this is awesome. And I asked my brother, I'm like, hey, man, I was like, is the weather like this all the time? He's like, every day. I'm like, are you serious? And I'm like, so the last 20 days I was in New York, I was counting down the days to go see him because me and my brother are really close. I said, it rained every day. He goes, I've been here for 2 years. It hasn't rained once. I was like, oh my God. And so from that point, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to figure it out, but I'm going to move to California, and that's where I want to be. It seems like it would just make me happier. Not that I was ever depressed, but man, the snow and the rain and the cold and stuff of New York can keep you pretty somber.
So the weather pulled you to California. At the time, you're still powerlifting?
So powerlifting kind of came and went a bunch of times, but the pull back towards it, was really, really strong every single time. And that's when you'll know when something is really like almost like destiny, I guess you'd say. When something's really going to happen for you, that's when you're going to know it's undeniable. You can't even shove it away. Like I kind of have said that powerlifting chose me. I didn't really choose it because it just kept coming back stronger and stronger. Every time I tried to get away from it, I was like, no, I'm going to be a football player. No, I'm going to be a pro wrestler. No, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Nothing ever worked except for powerlifting.
So then did you end up going to school again in California, or did you leave that behind?
Yeah, so I went to Santa Monica City College, where I played football and went to school there, and I played with Chad Ochocinco. He was he was our wide receiver.
Okay.
And also Steve Smith, who's a Hall of Fame wide receiver as well. So hopefully I get those guys on the podcast one of these days. Those guys never went to practice, so they barely know me. But it was a great opportunity. I was in over my head, and it was healthy for me though. And this also happened to me in professional wrestling. When I got into professional wrestling, and when I even just at this junior college, I quickly realized like I'm not the man. I'm not as good as I thought I was. Like I'm okay. I'm pretty good. I can make some tackles. I can make some plays. I can do some stuff. I can run pretty fast. I'm pretty strong, but I'm not like these guys. These guys are on another level. And when I went into pro wrestling, which was years later, but when I went into pro wrestling, I quickly identified like, I'm not like that guy. I'm not like that guy. I'm not like that guy. I mean, it was one person after another. I was in Louisville, Kentucky at the WWE training headquarters. Each person had a absolutely perfect body. And each person could get in the ring and perform all these crazy moves. And each person can get up there in front of a group of 30, 40 people, which was just our peers. It was just other wrestlers, and deliver a really powerful message in terms of like cutting like a promo, whether it be 30 seconds or they'll say, Jason Khalipa, get up there. You're fighting Andrew Zaragoza, July 31st in West Sacramento. Go. You're going to go for 3 minutes, and you'll go for 3 minutes. And then they'll change it on you, boom, like that. Okay, you're fighting John Cena, and you're fighting him in Alabama, and you got 30 seconds. And you got to boom, 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 boom. These guys are and girls, they were phenomenal. And I quickly realized, well, I'm pretty good at this, but I don't have the craft down the way these guys do.
Well, so talking about that, I think with powerlifting, you've obviously been dedicated to that at a very young age. But when you're playing football, and you kind of recognize that you weren't at the same caliber as some of these other players, or even with professional wrestling, do you think it's because they had this long background, this long, quote, destiny, like powerlifting found you didn't find power? Do you think wrestling found them? Do you think you were just you were pursuing the wrong venture, and how did you know that?
I didn't love it. Well, it was the truth of it. I didn't truly love it. Like I did love football, but I think I didn't know at a young enough age. Like if I would have, and I don't really know if this would have happened, but I think that my outcome in football would have been different if I knew more about nutrition, if I knew more about sleep, if I knew more about training. Now, I did train really hard for it, but I don't think I trained like, looking back at it, I didn't train like specifically for it. So I might have been able to change the outcome there, but who knows? Maybe genetically I just wasn't fit for it, or whatever you want to say. But one thing I recognized that I thought was really healthy for me was that for whatever reason, I cannot put the things together that some of these other men and women can put together, whether it be in football or whether it was in pro wrestling. And that was healthy for me in a sense that it made me shift gears. It made me change my goals. It made me change my dreams. And I don't think that's a negative thing. I think that's a good thing. I think that people do need to get punched in the mouth. People do need to go into the real world and say, whoa, that guy, okay. Okay, man. Let me take a deep breath here. That person is a lot faster than me. Yeah. That person's a lot stronger than me. That person's a lot better at CrossFit than me. Like that's a healthy thing. I'm sure you recognized it. Yeah. You won the CrossFit Games, and then you keep trying, and you're like, yeah, I could double my efforts, but like,
Yeah,
it's probably time for me to move on.
Well, and recognizing, for me, it's just recognizing that there's a lot of work that comes in all these things. So you might look at it and take a guy like Rich Froning. You might say, hey,
Never heard of him.
Yeah. He's a 4-time CrossFit Games champion. You might say, hey, he's naturally gifted. Sure, he has these natural talents he's been given, but he puts in so much work for so many years. And I think it's really important that when you put yourself in this professional wrestling, as an example, I mean, how many times have these guys been up on stage and had to do this? How many times have they had to go out there and work out to get that perfect body? And I think sometimes, it's hard to tell going into it, but once you recognize it, they've earned the right to be there. And I think we need to earn the right too.
Absolutely. And also, it's possible that they didn't have to work as hard to get there. That's fine. That's the way life is. Like we said earlier, maybe powerlifting chose me. Maybe wrestling chose them. John Cena, me and my brothers, we got John Cena into professional wrestling, and he was the perfect fit. Yeah. He was a perfect fit for it. He came in and he smoked everybody. But what people don't realize is the same 6-8 years that Seth Rollins worked his butt off, John Cena had to do the same thing, even though he was still the perfect fit for it.
And so you move out to LA and you're at Santa Monica Community College. Did you end up finishing college?
No, I never did. I didn't have that many credits left, but I don't know, man. There was always something in me that just recognized that like school didn't fit. It didn't fit well with me. And that's what a lot of my life is obsessed with, is trying to figure out things that fit into my life, my philosophy, my family's life, my family's philosophy. Like, that's what I'm obsessed with. Sometimes we'll do things here at Slingshot or at Super Training, and they could be really successful, but I kind of still get upset about it if it doesn't really fit. I'm like, it didn't really work the way I want it. I want it to be fun. I want to have a good time while we're doing this. And so for me, it's about trying to find things that fit. And for whatever reason, school just never fit. And so I left it behind. It's actually, probably something maybe I should go back and finish.
Do you have any regrets there?
No. It was good. Like, each move that I made, I got to a point where I just needed to move on. I just needed to do something else.
And so when you move on from going to school, what did you pursue next? I mean, you had professional, wrestling,
right?
And now what brought you back into powerlifting? Because you were away from it for a little bit. What brought you back in?
Man, the story gets to be really long from here. But basically, around that time is when I started. When I left school is around the time I started pursuing professional wrestling, which is ironic because I followed in my big brother's footsteps, all the way. Like, he played football, then he went to college for football, and then he dropped out, and then he chased down, pro wrestling. And I had some success in pro wrestling. I wrestled in Japan, and I got close, and I had a couple cups of coffee with the WWE. Like, I've been on TV before. I've done some stuff with them. But I've never, locked into like a contract. And once I was kind of close to some of that, is when I had Jake. And so I had to move on from a lot of that. But rewinding back to, dropping out of junior college and then shifting gears is right around the time I met my wife. And meeting my wife was like the biggest pivot point. And I think right around the time I met her is right around the time I started messing around with wrestling. So those two things kind of went hand in hand. And as our relationship developed, she was like asking me, like, what do you think you're going to do with, wrestling? And I was like, I don't know. Like, for now, I'm just learning it and it's fun and I don't know what it's for. I don't really know like 100% why I'm pursuing it, because I don't know what will come of it. But I said once I started, I would like to try to do it for like 5 years as hard as I can. And if something happens, then something happens. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't. And so as we fast forwarded 5 years later, I'm in Louisville, Kentucky. We have Jake. He's about 6 months old. And I told her, I said, we're at that 5-year point. And I was like, I don't think you enjoy living in Louisville. I said, I'm going to tell him today, that's it. I'm going to, move on. And so she agreed, and we moved back to California. And that's when I started getting back into powerlifting.
And so you met your wife, and so you're in college, you're kind of the pro wrestler. How are you supporting yourself? How are you supporting your family? or you and your wife, how are you supporting yourself on this wrestling kind of pursuit? Were you working other jobs?
Naked pictures on the internet.
I mean, aside from that, because obviously those would sell very well. But aside from those, were you working
I was pretty buff back then, I'll have you know. No, so I had a lot of different jobs. I was a bouncer, and I sold equipment for Louis Simmons, and I did all kinds of stuff. That's one part that I skipped. When we moved to the Midwest, my wife and I moved to the Midwest, is I basically, I guess you'd say, did like an internship with Louis Simmons, which I didn't really. I just trained with him. But I learned a lot while training at Westside Barbell. Back to how I supported us, I didn't. My wife did. My wife was the breadwinner. My wife made the money. My wife worked when we first met. She worked in radio advertising. So she basically just sold airspace. She worked for Westwood One, and as her career progressed with that, she kind of reached a higher and higher level. She was climbing that corporate ladder, and she was doing really good. And my philosophy, or my I don't know, my way of thinking is so different than hers. She is a real type A personality. She wants to get things done. She can't let something go, and just wound tight. And I'm always super relaxed. I actually had this happen to me. Somebody came and they just took my car and towed it away. I went to go look for my car one day, and it was gone. And I was like, oh, I guess I'll call a cab to go to the work. I didn't even care about work, because it was a piece of shit car anyway. So I didn't even care. I was like, all right, sayonara to that. But that's my mindset. I'm more stressed now than then, but we kind of evened each other out at some point. And so she was getting really stressed with work. She came home one day and was really upset. And I said, just go in there and quit. She's like, what are we going to do? I was like, I don't know, but we're in this together. We'll figure it out. It's like, just go in there and quit. Tell them tomorrow. She's like, I can't do that. That doesn't make any sense. I was like, what are you going to do? You keep working, keep being upset. You come home and be upset every day. I was like, doesn't make any sense. Be all stressed out. I'm like, it's cool that you make good money from it, but we'll figure stuff out. So she went in there and she quit. And things like that have put us against the wall. Around the time of the creation of the slingshot, we were about to lose our home. So things like that, they were, looking back at it, these were setbacks, but I always think a setback is really just a setup for something better. And
so your wife quits her job. At the time, did you have a son?
Yeah.
So you had a son, and you were kind of doing your thing. And then I imagine that was a really challenging.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, we didn't have Jake at the time, I don't think. Yeah.
You probably had Jake a little bit later on.
Right.
And so now your back's up against the wall. You said you come to Davis, you make your way here. And I'm really curious about this because so you get back into powerlifting, and then you're kind of working jobs here and there. But then you created this slingshot. And so all these years, did they kind of build up to this invention? And then can you tell us about the invention?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's still so many other years in there of just eating shit sandwiches without the bread, as I like to call it. But let me try to. So I've always been a dreamer. While I am relaxed and kind of chill about most things, I also I just dream big, I'm I'd even say delusional in some ways, especially then, if I look back now, I'm like, what was I thinking? That was never how did I think any of this was ever going to happen for me? But, growing up with my parents being very religious and being Christian, and I have faith in God as well. I always just thought what, if I'm just good, if I'm just a good person, good things will happen. If I just think positive stuff, positive things will happen. And so I tried. I mean, there's probably, one or two people out there that maybe disagree, but I've tried to always treat everybody I've ever met with the most respect I possibly could. And I always thought that would come back in some way and turn into something.
Well, you've also coupled that though with a lot of hard work over the years.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And the hard work, I mean, you can't get anything without putting in a lot of effort. And so I used to drive around Woodland, California, and I used to just look at these and I'm sure you've done this too, dreaming about having these different gyms and stuff. I used to look at these spaces all the time. I'm like, man, it'd be a great place for a gym. But I had no money. I had hardly any income coming in. So I don't know like why I was even like, why my mind was so obsessed with it. But I thought about it every day. My son at the time, he was an infant, and he loved to be in the car. He'd fall asleep in the car a lot. So I would drive him around. I'd drive him around Davis. I'd drive him around Woodland, and I'd always look at all these places. I'm like, oh, that place is like 2,000 square feet, and that place 1,000 square. Like that would be sick to try to figure out something. So I'm having these ideas all the time. Meanwhile, I pick up a job at the high school, and I'm a strength and conditioning coach, which most people saw in Bigger, Stronger, Faster, for a Pioneer High School in Woodland. And as I'm coaching, a friend of mine says, "Hey, did you know there's a gym going up on the other side of town over here?" I said, "No, I didn't know anything about that." He said, "Yeah, it's supposed to be really cool. It's supposed to be like, a newer style gym. It's not a commercial gym. It's to be a little different and stuff like that." And so I was like, "Oh, that's cool." And they said, I guess the guy, his son was going to go through the same school district and stuff. And he said, "Oh, you should link up with him, man. He's into lifting and stuff like that." So fast forward, I talked to this guy. And I said, it would be great if you had some, powerlifting stuff in this new gym that you're going to build, because I could see a lot of kids from the high school, coming in and training. And he was all for it because his son was into football. He was all excited by it. And so he said, "Well, what do you think it's going to take?" I said, if you're up for it, I could coach everybody. I've been powerlifting, since the time I was a kid. I know a lot about it. And I trained at Westside Barbell. And so I got some of these things under my belt. And, I said, maybe I can work with some of these kids, but we're going to need some equipment. Like powerlifting takes, some special equipment. We need some special bars and some things like that. And he's like, "Oh yeah, just tell me what you want." So I made up this list, but I was being really conservative because I thought at the time, like $500 was like a big load of cash. So I wrote up this list, and it was maybe about $2,000 or $3,000 worth of equipment. I was like, this would be a great start. Get like a platform, get like a bench, and get like a squat rack, and we're good to go. And so I gave him this list, and he was like, "This is it? This is all we need?" He's like, "You sure we don't need more?" And I was like, "Well, I said you could really outfit the place and have every single thing that you need for lifting." But I was like, that costs a lot of money. And he was like, "Well, what's a lot of money?" I was like, I don't know. It'd probably be like 12 grand or 10 grand or something. Yeah. And he was like, "Oh, that's no problem." He's like, "Let's do it, man. Let's go all in."
And so he gave you an opportunity, and then you started basically working there, right?
That was the beginning of Super Training Gym right then and there on the spot. It was like maybe, so at the time I was already lifting in California. I already knew some lifters, and then I told them, "Hey, we got this spot and this is what's going on." And so, I remember the day we sat down at the end of a workout, and one of the guys is like, "Well, now we kind of have a team. Like, what is, now we need a name, we need a name." And, so I said, well, I thought that this would be cool. I said, "Let's call it Super Training." And one of the guys is like, "That's stupid." I said, "Well, of course you think it's stupid. I only thought of it 5 seconds ago," right. Because it's got to stick around for a while.
Right.
But the reason I named it Super Training was after a guy named Mel Siff, who I went to his seminar. Mel Siff and Louis Simmons did a seminar. Mel Siff is a genius. And they did a seminar together. And Mel Siff wrote a book called Super Training. And at the break of the seminar, I was thumbing through this book, and Mel was like, "Hey, you're thinking about picking up the book?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." I said, "I have to run to the ATM. I didn't have any money, so I wasn't going to buy it probably anyway."
Yeah.
But I was just trying to think of an excuse. I was like, "Oh yeah, maybe after lunch I'll come back and buy it." And he said, "You know what?" He's like, "Why don't you just keep it?" And I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "You'll read it?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll use it. Yeah, for sure." And I kept the book, and it was probably about 2 weeks later that he passed away. And I was just thinking, like, man, what a cool
kind of paying homage to him.
Yeah, I was like, what a cool thing it would be. Well, that's where so in Super Training, Louis Simmons sparked a lot of stuff inside of me that got me fired up about lifting, about the box squats and the board presses and all these different things. And Louis brought a lot of science into training. And I always liked a lot of that stuff, even though I've never been able to really absorb it, and I've never been able to really maybe articulate it in the way that some other people can. I understand it, and I know it really well. And when I started looking through some of the stuff that Mel Siff had, even though his book is really complex, I mean, you have to have like a physics background to understand half of it. As I started looking through it, I'm like, man, a lot of this stuff makes sense. You know, he talked about force production and speed training and the possibility of training with bands and chains and all these different things. And I was like, wow, it just got my mind going like crazy, and to the point where I could never stop thinking about it. Even when, even something like watching TV, when I'd get up off the couch, I try to get up off the couch quick.
Yeah,
I would want to be explosive, you know, getting up off the toilet, same thing. Sorry for the visual, but it was locked in, man. I was locked in.
No, I have the visual. So Super Training Gym was born. How much of that do you think was, you know, a lot of times people look at some of your success with Super Train Gym with Slingshot and they say, hey, you know, Mark Bell got lucky, right? And how much of it do you think was just really good timing, and how much of it was you putting yourself in a position to get that yes, to get that more money because of all the things you had done? You know, because again, I think you and I talk about this pretty often, is that a lot of people from the outside, you know, they don't see the struggles, and that's fine, right? We don't expect them to. But I think to automatically assume that someone got to where they're at because of being lucky or whatever, I think that's unfortunate. You know, I think people should look at it more like, hey, that guy got there because of hard work, and they find out otherwise, then, well, that is what it is. But on this day that this gentleman provided you this $12,000, whatever it is, and gave you the opportunity to basically open up your own gym, was that...
This was inside of his gym, but it was the start of,
It was a destiny, was it fate, was it luck, was it you putting yourself in position? What do you think got you to that point?
I think as we talked about on with Seth Rollins was, you know, sacrificing for the unknown, doing things that you're not like, just following your gut, following your heart. And a lot of those things led me to, like, even when I was wrestling, you know, I didn't really know why. Like, I know that my big brother did it and he was my idol. And so I followed a lot of in his footsteps, but I didn't really know what it was for. And then now I know what it's for. Now it's to be able to speak in front of people. It's be able to audible. It's be able to change on the fly and be able to do things. And wrestling really opened up those doors for me. And then I know some incredible people from wrestling as well. And I learned a lot of great lessons from pro wrestling, which is weird, that I've carried into business. I've carried into my day-to-day life, that it's really helped with a lot of things.
Well, I want to talk about that. So now, you know, fast forwarding to where we're at today, you have 2 children. Your wife is, you know, highly involved in the business. You guys have a great business, Super Train Gym with the Slingshot.
She thinks she runs it, by the way.
Yeah, I'd say she probably does. Yeah.
She does.
Yeah. And you have a lot of different products you guys sell, and you guys are doing really, really well as a business. You've seen significant growth over the years. I mean, what is it like working with your spouse so closely? And then what have you guys you guys overcame so much adversity, I'm sure, in those early years because of financial strain. How has that positioned you for better success today? You don't have as much financial strain?
So for myself personally, I've never really cared that much about money. And nowadays it's a little different because I want the company to grow. I'm probably kind of obsessed with it at this point. I want the company to grow because I want to provide more opportunity for the people that already work here. And I want to be able to hire more men and women because I want to provide more opportunity for more people. And so I want the company to expand. I want the company to grow. I want more people to feel the way I feel every day about coming here to this facility, and the way Andrew feels, and a lot of the employees. And I want to provide more opportunity for a lot of people. So for myself, though, I've been fortunate in the fact that, like, when I didn't have any money, I never thought I was a loser. I always had good work ethic. I was always a good person. So I never really thought like that money equaled that I was successful or not successful. I never put any like merit to it. I also, I also saw my parents, I saw my dad climb the corporate ladder with IBM and then just get spit out of that machine like he was not even a human.
He was let go.
He was let go. Yeah. I mean, the company downsized. Poughkeepsie, New York is home of IBM headquarters, and they had, you know, I can't even remember how many employees, but some insane amount of employees, and they downsized when you know, they downsized, and my dad got shot out of that place like he was shot out of a cannon, because my dad was like probably about my age now, probably about 40, and he had a really high, you know, he had a high payroll going, and he was expendable, and they could bring in 3 people that could, do his job and then some that are a lot younger. And so I saw that happen, and I was like, man, that sucks, man. He went to college. He did all the right things. He went to 4 years of school. He got his degree. He showed up to work every day on time, whether he was sick or whatever, never complained. He was one of those kind of guys, old school kind of guy, right? And then just to be, kicked out of there like it was nothing was crazy to watch. But my dad didn't flinch. He didn't blink at all. He was like, okay, well, I'm going to start my own business. And he started doing real estate, and he started doing taxes. But in the interim, so much good fortune came our way from him losing that job. My brother Chris was able to go to USC Film School, which if my dad didn't lose his job, probably wouldn't have happened, because realistically we may not have been able to afford it, even though my dad was kicking ass and making a lot of money. USC is really expensive.
Right.
So because my dad lost his job, my brother was able to get financial aid, and that helped him get to college. Also at the time, I got to see a lot of what my family went through having money versus not having money. So we lived in this giant house, and I started kind of recognizing, like, oh, we have a pool, we got a basketball hoop, we have weights in the garage. Like, we had legitimate weights in the garage. We had a full-on Olympic lifting, thing going on, and it was crazy. And I was just like, okay, our families are a little different. My dad's a little different. Like, he makes more money. Like, I kind of saw these things happen, right? But, my mom and dad, they started out in a trailer with my oldest brother, Mike, as they were building their family. And we ended up back there again. And so when I was going to high school, we were in a trailer park. And when I used to tell people where I lived, they were like, wait, they're like, what are you talking about? They're like, isn't that a trailer park? I said, yeah, that's where I live. And they were like always astonished, because I guess they just thought, like, if you're poor, you look different or something. I don't know what they thought, but it wasn't necessarily because we were broke. It was because my dad was smart, and he
was
realized,
trying to be conservative and make sure, set up the family for.
And he realized, look, man, I got to put my kids through school, and but I saw all those things in my eyes are really positive, even though they may seem negative. They were all really positive, and it told me, look, man, you put your family before everything else. And that's what my parents did. And it was amazing to watch. It's like, how did my dad and mom, how did they suck up their pride and go from that giant house to living in a trailer? Well, they did it because they had to do it for their kids. And so they just went through it. They just plowed right through it together.
And so looking at your relationship and where you guys have gone and what you guys are doing, you talk a lot about some of these setbacks. And I know your brother passed, which was just his anniversary.
Yep.
Which I'm sure is tough on the family. And so your brother passing, financial going, like, up, a lot of ups and downs for your family, and then also for you and your wife, right? I mean, and it seems like money doesn't define anything. It's just another component. But
Yeah.
you want to build a business that's special and provides for people. But I want to talk about some of these setbacks and how you've kind of learned from them. So we've talked about the financial side, which I think is really, really cool to kind of see your mindset, right? It's like family first, set them up, do the best you can. And so is that a component of why you also want to build this business? Because you want to be able to set up your family, and then also want to talk about your brother and how that adversity helped your family potentially get a little bit closer, or did it not,
Yeah. Yeah. So my parents lived next to me because I bought their home for them.
Right.
I bought my dad a car. I bought my brother a car. And like a lot of the fortune that we've made off of Slingshot has provided me with being fortunate enough to give back to everybody and to be able to provide something. But buying that home for my parents was the greatest thing that I ever did, because my parents they're right next door. I mean, some people might be like, wow, it'd be crazy to have your mom and dad next door like that. But like, we love it. My dad and I go for a walk every night. We go for a walk usually with my son, Jake. And my parents are very involved in their grandkids. That's why they moved from New York in the first place to come out here. But that relationship has been awesome. And they're not over every day. They're not like, hanging out, like they're not like waiting around for me or whatever.
Right. You have your boundaries.
They got their own schedule too, but in terms of, my brother's passing, and it making us closer, so when my brother passed, I think having the family all come together and, you know, going to like his funeral and kind of seeing the impact he had on so many people. And seeing like cousins and second cousins and then you're kind of confused. You're like, man, like, okay, and at the time I lived in California. I was like, man, like, that's really stupid. Like the fact that I live in California, just because I live in California, I'm not in contact with these people anymore. This is kind of dumb, you know? And social media, to be honest, has helped bring us all together because it's a little easier to follow what everyone's doing without picking up the phone. But it made me kind of recognize how valuable those people are. And like, you know, everyone has that uncle or that cousin or whatever that you're uncomfortable hanging around with, like around the holidays or whatever. But even that person, you recognize how important that person is. Like it's important to be around that person. It's important to communicate with that person. It's your family. It's really, in the end, it's kind of all that we have. Like who's going to care when you die? Who's going to really care? You know, some people might be like, "Oh, Jason Khalipa won a CrossFit Games." Like, okay, cool. And then the next day they're told, you know, they're back to it or whatever. But it's going to be the people that are going to be by your side as you're passing or as you're sick or whatever. It's going to be your wife. It's going to be your kids. It's going to be, you know, if your mom and dad are still around or whoever's really close to you. Those are going to be the people that are going to be right by your side as you really go through hard times. It's not going to be some random fan on social media. You know, it's going to be your family. And so a lot of the setbacks that we've had, it's made me kind of recognize that. And you hear it a lot, and it sounds kind of cliche, but you know what? Communication is king. Communication is a really key element, and the holidays are coming up. So I'm going to encourage you guys and girls out there that are listening to this podcast to talk to your aunt that you have never really actually spoke to. Like, try to get some perspective on that person. Try to understand them better. Maybe give them a drink or two to get more out of them. But family is really really important thing to me.
Well, I think, you know, obviously I agree with you 100%. When Ava was diagnosed with leukemia, it was very, very clear that we had a lot of family and we had a lot of friends who were supportive, but the family were the ones who were there every day, all day for months, right? I mean, years.
Right.
And, you know, I think what's interesting with family is that you kind of get family, you don't get to choose them, right?
Yeah.
But I think if you take a step back for a second, you look at, you know, everybody's life experiences allow them to be who they are. And if you kind of look back at how they were raised, what's going on, and you find a commonality somewhere that you can start a conversation. Right. And, you know, back to you in high school, you know, you were kind of like so against these other guys or girls or whoever. But in reality, like, you don't know, you know, if you had maybe taken a step back for a second, just appreciated for who they were as a person and their background, you could have maybe started a conversation, maybe connect with them on another level. You never know.
Yeah, right. And to that note, though, at the same time, I think that like like me being able to like channel like hatred into something positive is something that is still to this day very critical for me. Like, I don't know why, but that's like the way that I'm wired. So like I love to you know, use that kind of stuff as like bullets. You know, it's like it's loading me up with more ammo. Anything anyone's ever said that's negative, I'm like, perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that. Like, you just loaded up my gun even more. Like, I'm ready to go.
Well, social media must be loading you up all, you know.
Yeah, it is. It's empowering me. It's making me stronger a lot of times. And, you know, sometimes those things do bug you. I mean, how can it not, right? Sometimes those things do throw you off, but in general, I mean, they're more positive. Or sometimes I'll try to like reflect and think, oh, I wonder why that person thinks that about me.
Right. Taking a step back and kind of putting the onus on yourself. Like, why are they saying this? And so to kind of wrap up this conversation, I just want to talk about, on a daily basis, you have 2 children, a wife, successful business like we talked about, and you get in your training, right? What do you do on a typical day to help support all of those goals? How do you prioritize and develop, you know, and how do you prioritize those goals to be the best husband, father, you know, gym owner, et cetera, business owner that you can be? What do you do during the day? Any particular strategies you might have?
I try to be prepared for every day. So that way I can do the best that I possibly can. I can be set up for success. And I think that, you know, sometimes people might say, oh, my schedule's crazy. I really can't do that, you know. But I think that for the most part, you're kind of kidding yourself. I think we all know, we all kind of understand where we're going to be each and every day. We know our responsibilities every single day. And so because you know all that, you could set up your fitness. You could set up your nutrition. You could set up your religion. You could set up like whatever the things are that you want to do, whether it's going to church or taking your kid to a movie or whatever. You can kind of schedule these things. You can start to, if you need to write them down or put them in a calendar or whatever. My schedule gets pretty wacky. So like if it doesn't go into my calendar nowadays, I kind of lose it. I kind of forget it. And so it's important that you don't start a day unless it's planned. Like, and even if the day's not planned, let's say you had a really hectic couple days and you go, oh my God, I don't even know what I'm doing tomorrow. Sit down for 5 minutes. It's not going to take very long. And think about what it is you're going to do. A lot of the guys and girls here that work out, a lot of times I'll shoot them a text at night. It might be like 8:30 at night or so as I'm starting to get ready for bed. And I'll say, hey, I'll be in the gym at like 7 a.m. tomorrow, because maybe like I got behind and I didn't know I was going to train that particular day or whatever. But for me, like the fitness side of it and the nutrition side of it are huge. Like if those things aren't in place, everything else, kind of goes all sideways on me. I enjoy lifting. I have a lot of fun lifting. And if I'm not on point with my food, not that the food like dictates my mood really, but if I'm like getting fat, I'm getting out of shape, or I'm not as strong as I'd like, it just throws me off. It's so part of like my DNA now that if those things aren't in place, I just don't feel right.
Well, I like your idea of preparation. I think that's really important for people to think about. If you segment out your day the day before, then you don't have, yeah, you're always going to have these curveballs that are thrown at you, but you're going to be better prepared for your day because you're preparing for your day, right? Instead of just kind of attacking the day by day, you could attack it the day before so you can really thought process it out and then get into it. And I think that's a great takeaway.
I think it's absolutely insane and ludicrous that people leave the house and they don't have any idea of what they're going to eat for the day or where they're going to go. It's like, how can you be on point with your nutrition? Now you've been doing this for a long time. You've been in the fitness space for a long time. So maybe for somebody like you, it's not hard for you to audible and understand what's good for you and what's not. But for most people, if they get hungry, they're going to make a really bad choice. Yeah. So you want to have some food with you. Maybe like you're not a food prep person. Maybe you don't like the idea of doing all that. So there's meal prep companies nowadays, but even something that's really easy is to bring some cheese with you, bring some nuts with you, stop off at Starbucks. They have hard-boiled eggs that are already cooked. I mean, there's a lot of options. Even when you go to the airport nowadays, there's a lot of options in terms of healthy food. They're not just junk food. So you should at least have an idea in your head of like what's my food going to look like for the day? Because how are you going to leave the house at 8 in the morning and then not come back until 8 at night with no preparation on your food? If nutrition is part of your lifestyle, if you want to lose weight, you want to be in better shape, you have fitness goals, why in the world would you not have a plan for it?
And so you've competed in powerlifting at a high level. You then did a bodybuilding competition most recently. And I think what's really interesting about me looking at you is that you're kind of putting your money where your mouth is, meaning like, today you're fasting. So you and I go to a coffee shop and you're just having coffee because you're not going to eat any food. Whereas, I get to grab whatever I got. Mm-hmm. And so you're fasting. You're actually, again, you're trying it out. You're your own laboratory and then you're moving on. And so you did the bodybuilding thing, which takes a ton of dedication in terms of nutrition, which it's like a high intensity workout for, your food. Yeah. And now what is the next thing for Mark Bell? You alluded to it earlier, but just to put it on proper podcast. What's the goal?
Yeah. So, one of the things I want to do is I'd like to bench 500 pounds at weighing 220 pounds. It's something I've never done before. And so it gives me something to chase, but I'm not such a meathead that's my only goal. I have a lot of other goals. I want to continue to reach more people, continue to empower more people, continue to try to figure out a way to continue to make the world a better place to live, try to continue to make great products for people. So those are just, it's a short list of goals, but like I have like millions of goals. I have like, I always say like your goals, there's bigger goals and there's like dreams, right? There's really huge things out there. But then in addition to that, there's kind of almost like, I like to have my goals almost be like a checklist, of things to do. So it's not always that hard, but when I when I get to check something off my list, I feel really good about it. So it could be something as simple as like get a haircut for the day. Like to me, that's a goal. Like, and if I get it done, then I feel good. Shop for Christmas, boom, done. Like I feel like I'm on fire when I get these things done. Even my nutrition or even my training could be on the checklist. Like, why not? Why not keep adding up points on the scoreboard?
Yeah, you're adding up points on the scoreboard. And I think that's, And I think it's really interesting that you want to be benching 500 pounds at 220 as one of your goals, right? It's because it's something to chase. So for example, in May, I'm competing this Legends event for CrossFit. And it's cool for me. I'm excited about it. Or I might do a jiu-jitsu competition at the end of January because it gives me something to kind of shoot for. And that's just a goal that I'm going after. But I think that translates into so many other things in your life because you're trying to get after this one avenue. But now how about these other avenues? I feel like you kind of raise the bar across the board for yourself.
It has so much to do with personal and self-development, and I've been trying to figure out like what's the magic in fitness, and I've been trying to figure out all these things over the last couple of weeks and months, and what's the magic in nutrition, and I have never been able to like really put it into words or to have the right perspective on it. I don't think anybody else has been able to define it either, but I feel like people that are in fitness and people that are into their nutrition, I feel like we found like a secret. And it's almost like these other people that never got into any of it, they're not in on the secret. And you said earlier, like sometimes you're thinking about a family member and you're like, why? Like, why don't you start moving, dude? Like you want to shake them, right? At the same time, you want to have some perspective into their life and say, okay, well, maybe it's just not their thing. That's fine. They got a lot of other things going on. I'll try to be understanding of that. But I actually think that everyone, I think every person on this planet, maybe in some other countries, maybe it's different, but like if you're not moving a lot as part of your everyday like life, then I think everyone needs to lift. I think actual lifting, not just going on a bike and not just going for a run. I think that everyone needs to lift. I think it just does too many positive things for you. It just does so much for you. And the fact that we try to sell it on aesthetics is a shame, because aesthetics is like, it's probably like number 55 on the list of great things that exercise can do for you. Yeah,
especially lifting. I mean, psychologically, the empowerment that it gives to men and women, and then obviously physical. My wife was having a hard time, my mother was having a hard time lifting my daughter in her car seat, and she started lifting, and boom, her deadlift goes up, and now all of a sudden she can put my daughter in the car seat. And this is years ago.
Yeah, that's great.
So look, I think you've done a lot of amazing stuff. I can't wait to see what's next in your pursuit, not only of the bench press, but just in terms of the business. I think you have the same mindset I do of just trying to raise the bar across the board. Where can people find out more about Mark Bell, Super Train Gym, the Slingshot? Where can we go?
You can hit up my YouTube channel, which is Mark Bell Slingshot, or you can go to markbellslingshot.com. You can see all the products that we have. We make hip circles, slingshots, knee sleeves, all that kind of stuff. Anything that protects you for lifting, we make. And then additionally, you can check me out at Mark Smelly Bell on Instagram and Twitter.
All right. Well, all right, guys. Well, I hope you all have a good day, and thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you.
So we're good. You guys don't want to keep going for extended podcast, little extra
like a
deluxe feature.
Extra.
What's the extra?
No, just for our platform, just for maybe if Mark has any questions for you.
Yeah. It's 2:00. Yeah. I mean, maybe like 15 minutes.
Sounds good.
Quick rapid fire.
Yeah. Whatever you got.
Cool. Well, then I'll just start off. So just for the people that don't know exactly, how many gyms do you work with? Or that you own, I should say. Yeah, my bad.
We own, I own 21 gyms. 6 of them are open to the public, and the rest of them are corporate. So we have 3 like kind of verticals of our business. We have digital, corporate, which is like us inside of a company, and then us open to the public.
Gotcha. And then these are just people ranging from like literally everybody on the planet, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking locations from Shenzhen, China, to 3 in Malaysia, to Mexico, and then the Bay Area, obviously. So we've had a wide demographic. It's been a really cool experience because, when we first introduced functional fitness to China, I was out there 6 years ago, and back then they didn't have any idea what was going on. And even today, it's still slowly progressing over there. But I mean, it's pretty awesome to introduce new people to functional movement. Yeah,
and that's kind of what I was going to ask you is how do we get the average person to start moving? I know Mark just touched on it, but I mean, you're in contact with so many different people in all walks of life. how can I get my aunt to start moving around?
It's a really touchy subject because on the one hand, you want to encourage them, but on the other hand, if you encourage them too much, they become resentful. And I've seen this in my own family so many different times where I just need to kind of take a step back, and when they're ready, they're ready. I think it's kind of one of those things where almost like I don't want to allude it to, but almost if you have some type of, there's resources out there to help you, we need to let them know that they're there. And when they're ready, they'll come to us. And I think that if you try and force it too much, then I think also making it accessible, right? So I let my family know, like, hey, let's just start with a walk, and trying to make it fun, I think, is a unique way of doing it.
I think you hit the nail on the head with the walking, because, like, I mean, you're not going to really you're not going to run into anybody that's going to say, like, they might hate to walk on a treadmill, but in general, unless somebody's got some weird pain going on, they're not going to hate to walk.
No.
I mean, hey, look, go do a couple 10-minute walks every day, or do one half an hour, 20-minute walk. Like, you can make time for that. And what I've noticed with people is that success breeds success. So if you start walking one day and you walk for 5 minutes and you're kind of out of breath, maybe you go up a flight of stairs or these kinds of things, and you recognize, like, oh, wow, I'm not even out of breath. Maybe it's those walks that I've been doing. The second that you get any sort of progress, or somebody says, hey, man, you look great, doing something different, boom, you're off to the races. I mean, sometimes it's just like the one compliment.
Well, and that's the tough part about fitness. And that's the tough part about our society right now, is that a lot of people want instant gratification. And one of the, social media does not help. But it's tough in fitness because there is nothing instant about it. The only instant thing you might feel is soreness. And, especially in the Asian culture, soreness equals injury to them. They believe that if they're sore, again, I don't want to stereotype this but in general, when the awareness of what soreness is versus injury is not as prevalent. And so that's something we have to overcome. We have to let them know that, hey, this soreness is normal. Obviously, there's certain levels of it.
I wish I had that mindset. But save me a lot of grief.
Yeah. But, you know what I mean? And so I think for us, the key is letting people know that there's this fitness thing is not like a 1 day, a 1 week, a 1 year. It's something I want to do forever. And when people are ready to jump on, we want to be a safe spot for them. And they don't need to do... what I think is really interesting about the fitness space, I'm sure, Mark, you would agree with this. For so many years, there's been so many fads. There's been so much information that goes out there. And I think it's really been simplified recently. And I hope more people are aware of this. You don't need to be in the gym for a long time. You just have to be in the gym with intent, purpose, and get after it. And it's almost similar to relationships. And I think when you're going to a dinner and you want to spend an hour dinner with your wife, but yet you're distracted, you're on your phone, you're talking to somebody else, then all of a sudden that quality time you're spending with them is not adding, you're not doing the most you can. Same thing goes with the gym. When you go into the gym, you don't need to be there for a long time. You just got to add a lot of impact by being focused and present on whatever you're doing.
Yeah, and consistency, right?
Consistency.
I mean, that's been the biggest change in my life, really, is training with Mark. Is like we're training every day, whereas before I would train once or twice a week, skip a whole week, skip another week, and then come back and be sore and feel terrible. But now with the consistency, it's like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And that's kind of what I tell a lot of people, because, we have cool run-ins with, like, Joe Rogan, Aubrey Marcus, whoever, and people are like, oh my God, dude, I'm so jealous of you. Like, how do you, like, dude, what you find out is they're all normal people, and B, they've just been working consistently for a lot longer than everybody else that you speak to.
Yeah, and one of the things you can actually think about that is most people don't really reach their level of success until, later on, because it takes a lot of years to develop this confidence, background, awareness to get to where they want to be. And it takes years and years and years and years.
Absolutely.
And I think this idea of instant gratification is going to be something that hopefully slowly gets kind of pushed down. I know a lot of people talk about, millennials being entitled, this and that. I think that's a separate issue. I think this one is instant gratification because people's attention span is dropping so much. And with fitness, it doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
But when it does happen, it'll happen for a long time.
But in terms of your mood, though, I mean, it's every once in a while, like you're just in a crap mood or whatever, something's bugging you. But in general, when you show up to the gym and as soon as you start moving around, I mean, I would say, like, it takes me like 3 minutes, maybe 8 minutes, somewhere in that time frame. I'm like, okay, I'm here. Boom, here we go.
Yeah. But I think for us, we also know what that feels like. Like we're vibing, we're having a good time. Our body's feeling good. But for someone who's maybe new to fitness, they don't even know what that feels like yet. And they have to find I think it's really important that you find a good support system, whether it be a good coach or just yourself, right? But you need to kind of fitness. There's so much information. And I would encourage people to find somebody who knows more than them, right, about fitness, and just have them help them and start slow and then work their way up, because anything's better than nothing.
Mm-hmm. And just try something. And I know I encourage people to lift, but just anything, just try something, and that'll lead you to trying other things.
Yeah. Outside of just trying, do you think that, because you're saying that, like lifting, actual like resistance training and stuff, do you think you can get there through like, say, something like HIIT training? Because I know there's a lot of like, the older audience, they have kids, they have this, and it's like, dude, okay, I only have like 20 minutes to work on something.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Can I gain muscle and strength? Yeah. I mean, I do like the resistance training. I like the kind of the act of going to the gym and throwing around some weights, but you can do this stuff anywhere. And if you're new to it, you're going to gain muscle and you'll be able to make a lot of progress because your body's not used to it at all. So you don't even need resistance in the beginning necessarily.
Well, I think what he's talking about when he's talking about lifting, which I'm in agreement with him, is implementing with an external load and or loading yourself up in some way, shape, or form. And that could be a deadlift with a lot of weight on the bar, or it could be utilizing a dumbbell that's very light, but actually performing a deadlift with that. And I think for us, we have our own NC Fit app that has daily workouts that people can follow if they want to download it. But that's a great resource, because there's something where you can just look at it and you can just pick a workout and just go out there and do it. And it doesn't have to be long. It just has to be properly. So when we think about a workout, I think about movements that produce a lot of power, burpees, box jumps, kettlebell swings, because they're moving your body or an external object a long range of motion. I think about time domains that are anywhere from like 12 to 20 minutes, because they carry themselves well for short sprints and also long workouts. And I think about utilizing functional movements that are kind of like thrusters and these movements because they kind of, instead of looking in terms of like what muscle group am I working, I think about it more in terms of the function it's performing. So a deadlift and a back squat might incorporate similar muscle groups. I think we could agree on that.
Yeah.
But they're completely different functions. One you're pulling from the floor, the other you're squatting, lowering, and raising. So I think that's the way we look at our workouts, and finding a coach to help you with that kind of stuff could be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It's just tough because people, they don't see, you're right, they want the instant gratification. So they can't really understand that in 6 months, you're actually going to feel worse if you don't put yourself through this workout right now. So it's going to be tough to try to educate everybody on that subject.
Yeah. And when you see the wins, when you're walking up the stairs, like you're talking about, Mark, or able to lift your kids up, one of the things I think I really want to
Or just not be in pain. That's amazing. Not be in pain. You're like, oh man, my back doesn't hurt anymore. Like, whoa, like what's that from?
One of the things that I could definitely hang my hat on is that I don't believe fitness should ever be an inhibitor at all. Like, what I mean by that is, if my son, we just got back from Hawaii yesterday, if he wants to go out into the water, I should feel comfortable to be able to go out with him. If he wants me to swing him around, I should feel comfortable doing that. If he wants to walk upstairs or go out for a jog, fitness shouldn't be something where I say, oh, son, I can't do that with you because
I'm jacked up.
Or whatever, right? Or I'm not physically capable of doing that. So for me, that's my motivation. And for anybody with kids, I think that's a really deep internal drive, is just to never allow fitness to be something that inhibits you from doing something with your children.
Do you think on the opposite end of that, like that you fitness so hard that you can't do something?
Well, yeah.
So that might be something to be aware of if you're like us, maniacs.
Well, so like for a while, when I was really training for the CrossFit Games, there was times where I overtrained for sure. And you're so beat up, you're so sore, or you're just spending so much time training that's time away from your family or time away from other things. And I think in life, if I had to look at my training right now, 1 hour, you turn on the clock and you really attack it with focus, whether a lift and a conditioning workout, you don't need too much more than that. And I'm still seeing my strength and conditioning still doing really well compared to when I was training 4 or 5 hours a day. And so I think there's extremes on both ends. But I think that's just something you need to be aware of, mainly from where your time is spent. Because if you're spending 5 hours a day training, well, what are you giving up with that 5 hours?
Yeah.
And do you need 5 hours? Probably not.
Do you think that's one of the things that all of this has cost you the most? Going after a CrossFit Games Championship and owning 20 plus gyms. Do you think that's probably what's cost you the most, is just time?
I think time is obviously a very valuable commodity or thing. And, I wrote a book. It releases soon. It's called As Many Reps as Possible. And for me, I'm trying to prioritize my life to be as present and focused on whatever I'm doing at a given time. But I do think if you look at it, you only have so much time in the day. And if you're allocating it, you just need to know what you're giving up for it. And there was a time in my life that I was prepared to give up free time with my friends. Like there's no such thing as Xbox for me or any of that kind of stuff because I was so driven to win the CrossFit Games. Now I'm very driven to build a successful business and build a really happy family. And so I have to give up other things that don't align with those purposes. And you have to be okay with it.
Yeah.
And later on in life, something I think about all the time is just, am I going to have any regrets later on? And at this point, I don't have any, and I hope I never do.
Yeah, that's really well said. You mentioned something earlier. You mentioned resources. What resources have you leaned on to help you continue to be successful? Like people that you connect with and people that you know, or reading books or listening to podcasts, things like that.
I mean, I definitely listen to podcasts. I enjoy those. I think those long format, I don't care how big the social reach is of a person. I care more about what impact they could have on my life through the information they're sharing and their life experiences. So if you're an ER doctor, that's super intriguing to me. How do you develop the mindset to be able to walk in and have no idea what's coming in the door? I don't care if you have 1 million social media followers. I care about how did you go to school and stay dedicated to this and then get ready for it. Whereas, so I think having business mentors around me, surrounding myself with, my wife is a very, she's a very smart, and she keeps me very grounded. She checks me a lot, right? I mean, if she doesn't think that something's right, she's not afraid.
You guys been together since high school too.
Yeah, we've been together since high school. So she's ready to say it like it is. And so those are the kind of people. And I think, surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals is critical. Like you and me, we've been friends for a long time. And I think finding a group of, one of the things in the book that I write is find like 3 to 5 friends, shoot them an email, shoot them a text, and just set up a time to sit down and chat. And then put it on a calendar for reoccurring meetings where you just talk about life and raising the bar together. Like you and I, we just got back from the coffee shop. We're talking about, hey, how do we raise the bar together? Like not just business, but family and everything. And I think having those like-minded conversations encourages you to be better, be a better version of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I talk about some of the same people like Gary Vee and Andy Frisella and some of these different people, and we utilize each other for stuff. I've utilized people from your team. You utilize some of my contacts, and I think that a lot of people could be more resourceful. I think they don't understand how many opportunities there are that are kind of swirling around them and how many people they really know. And nowadays, there used to be like 7 degrees of separation. Now there's like kind of like 1.
Yeah.
Because somebody could just DM you. Maybe they don't get you the first time, but if they do it 100 times, maybe they will contact you.
So Gary Vee was recently on my podcast, AMRAP Mentality, and at the end, he said something to me. I was pretty shocked by it. He said, "Hey, I want to appreciate you for appreciate your resilience." Like I said, "Oh, what do you mean?" So what happened was we had scheduled to meet with him, and I flew all the way out to New York. And so I'm out in New York, and like the day before, he says, "Hey, I got to cancel the podcast with you." I'm like, oh, "Come on, man!" Like I flew all the way to New York, and so I wasn't upset, but I said to him, I tried to find different ways to work it. Right? Hey, can we meet earlier? Can we meet later? And we ended up doing the podcast. And he said later on that if I had just said okay, right, this might not have happened for another 6 months or maybe a year, but because I kind of found different ways to navigate it, and because I was resilient in this fact, we were able to do a podcast. And I think that same thing could be said with connections, networking, where you don't just ask people for something when you need it, but you just reach out on a consistent basis and try and find ways to elevate the whole crew.
Right.
And not just when you need something, but all the time. And you do it on a reoccurring basis. You're just resilient at it, right? Might not answer the first time. I've messaged Joe Rogan probably at least 10 times on Instagram. Eventually, he will get back to me. I just don't know when.
Yeah, no, eventually something that you do or something you say will resonate with him and it will make sense. But who knows who it will be? Like we just talked earlier about Mark Sisson, how he leveled up and sold his business to craft. I know Mark Sisson used to have a background with CrossFit, but like let's say that he pops up on there again. Boom, he mentions your name, and now it's like, oh, who's this guy? You never know how it's going to happen. But if you keep putting it out there, if you keep being resilient, if you keep being resourceful, it most likely will happen.
Yeah,
it most likely will turn into something. You got anything else?
No, I just wanted to ask, when is the book coming out?
January 8th. So up until that point, all proceeds go to NIGU, which is the Never Ever Give Up. And, we talked about it here a while ago, and it's been really well received. I'm nervous about it, right? It's kind of like, I'm nervous about it because I'm putting myself out there a little bit, but I just hope that it makes an impact on people and they walk away fired up to just grind it out. And, at the same time, for anybody who's out there who's debating about putting out a message or whatever, there are pros and cons to putting out your message. But for me, it's my truth. It's who I am. And there was nothing I wrote in that book that wasn't, factual and about me. And, if people like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't. But I think it will make an impact on people. I hope it does.
As you've been building up this business, you've done many different versions of it, and you've changed your gym business many times over. Your gyms, some of your gyms used to be like gigantic, and you still own some of those gyms. But then you had a different mentality more recently where the gym is smaller, not a lot of logos. I think in the past, maybe you had a bunch of different sponsors and things like that in the gym. And now it's like, we got a color coordination that we're going for, very specific, very clean look. And then on top of that, you have an app and you have coaches that are coaching outside the gym. What are some things that kind of led to this? Have you sat down kind of with Jason Khalipa? Have you sat down with yourself and kind of said, I need to figure out some other ways of driving more revenue or increasing the value of what we're doing?
Yeah, it's never really been about revenue. It's been about improving our products for our member experience and having consistency and seeing where the industry is shifting. Anybody who looks at people like Hollywood Video, Blockbuster, any of these companies, is that, there's a timestamp on everything unless you pivot, right? And so for us, we had the old school hardcore CrossFit for a long time, and it was great. But we had to shift and pivot towards smaller locations that were in retail zoning, and they're more expensive. So we couldn't have these giant locations. We had to, realize that we're no longer this grungy warehouse. We need to be in retail spaces for a number of reasons. And we want to have clean, consistent branding across all of our locations. And I think with the app, that was our way of reaching an at-home market, or that was our way of originally, we wanted to put out to our members the workouts so they could see it on our own app. And then we wanted to put out coaching product on there with all of our coaches worldwide. But then it just naturally kind of grew into something more where, hey, we're putting out for our coaches. Why don't we put it out for other gyms? But it didn't intend initially as a revenue driver. Same thing for the app. In January, it'll start being a paid app. It never started off that way. But now that we see potential, we have an obligation as a business to shift and go, support that because it gives opportunity for our team.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, you hear a lot of people, successful people that say you got to be comfortable being uncomfortable and whatnot. And so that gets you to, having X amount of gyms. I lost track, sorry. But how important do you think it is to, one, get uncomfortable, but two, you're saying you're stepping outside of the box. You went from focusing on fitness and now, oh shit, I'm going to write a book.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you talk about getting comfortable with uncomfortable. I think that's something that's very important for everybody to do. In a number of ways. You could do that on a small basis, like, for example, an ice bath, right? Or you could do that on a, bigger basis, which is, writing a book, which you've never done before. And I think for me, the reason why I chose to write the book was because at some point in my life, it's not about the money. It's not about accolades. It's about, when I leave this earth, what are going to be some of the impacts I can make on somebody's life. And if someone can listen to a podcast that I'm on or consume some of my content through a book, through whatever, and get inspired, motivated, and driven, then I'm doing my job. And as long as I continue to think about that and then improving our member experience, I think we're on the right path. When Ava was diagnosed, it really changed my whole outlook on why I wanted to be successful. I wanted to work hard because I wanted to be in a position where if I ever needed to again, I could take a step back and focus only on her. So that's why I need to be financially secure. But it also made me realize there's a lot of people out there that could use just a little bit of content just to get them inspired. And you never know what that little spark might do for them. Yeah, little one conversation, that something could totally change their entire life. And I feel obligated and not obligated, that's not the right word. I feel encouraged to do that. So that's why I try and get uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And am I going to get, look, the internet's a very interesting thing. For every 10 people you help, there's one person that just wants to hate. And that's okay.
Yeah.
All right, man. We're going to drop on out of here. That's all the time we got. Appreciate you guys listening. Thank you so much.
All right.
Later.